Well, a very warm welcome to another episode of Property Developers and Investors Podcast. And I'm delighted to invite a very special guest today and introduce the great Sam Cooper. Hi, Sam. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Mark. How you doing?
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Now, we've known each other for what seems like years now, and you've got a fascinating story and loving some of the really emerging things that you're looking at. But for those of listeners who don't know you yet, can you just explain a bit about your background, what you do, and then we'll dig into some interesting elements.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem at all. So, first of all, thanks for inviting me on. It's an honour to be part of the show. So I listen to it, all the time. So it's great. But yeah, effectively, my name's Sam Cooper. I'm based up in Coventry in the Midlands. I'd like to sort of say, really, I'm a family man foremost. So I definitely think that family definitely comes first in my life. So that's definitely always at the forefront of what I'm doing. So part of a group called the Front Row Dads, and we're a group of guys that basically have this kind of motto that basically says, family first, kind of business second. So we're family men with businesses, not businessmen with families. So so I've got a partner, Joe, and two kids. So we've got Isla that's 7 and Jacob that's 10. And predominantly, I've been in business for the last probably since 2005. I've been kind of managing the family business and then running my own businesses since about sort of 2013. And sort of in that time, I've started businesses, sold a business, and also closed a business as well. So kind of done the whole kind of life cycle of business, if you like. Been through all the ups and downs of it. But essentially now I am mainly in property now. So my property is my main kind of focus, and we've got a small property portfolio based up here in Coventry that generates enough cash flow now to kind of cover most of our day-to-day sort of living expenses. And we also now run a micro lettings agency as well, which has kind of come off the back of our own portfolio and obviously managing property for other people. And that management company now is essentially it's a long-term, so buy-to-let management company, as well as serviced accommodation as well. So we run a few serviced accommodation units as well, some of our own, some for others, and we also do some rent-to-rent stuff as well. So I also help to coach and mentor kind of newbie people getting into property. So people that are just kind of starting out on their journey. So I help to coach and kind of mentor those guys. And I'm also a SaaS trustee on the family SaaS. So so that's pretty much me in a nutshell, really. So
brilliant stuff. Well, starting your business journey in 2005, you certainly had to ride through a number of, I would say, cycles in the economy, but unprecedented cycles, I think we should
yes,
say.
Absolutely.
And I guess one of those areas that's certainly prominent at the moment. I thought you did a brilliant presentation the other week at one of our mastermind events on the volatility of current energy prices, and that's hanging on everybody's lips, whether you're a homeowner or a property owner or landlord. So given your visibility in maybe HMOs, serviced accommodation, rent to rents, and working with many different landlords, just build this picture of what you're seeing in terms of energy volatility and the effects it's having on landlords.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's obviously there's certain costs and things you can control within when you're running property businesses, and there's obviously certain costs and things that you can't really control. And obviously energy is one of those that I think everybody always thought it was fairly constant, as far as everyone just kind of paid an amount for energy, and to be honest, I'm not sure that anyone really paid that much sort of attention to it. I mean, I'm probably just as guilty for that as well. Obviously, you kind of went around switching light bulbs off and turning the heating down and things like that in your own home. And also, we obviously have one eye on obviously making sure that properties are operating as efficiently as they can, from a central heating point of view and that sort of side of things. But to be honest, I think it's an area that probably not that many people paid close attention to. But obviously that kind of came to a screeching halt fairly recently, with obviously everything that's going on and all the stuff that's been hitting the press with the with the energy costs. And it's now suddenly one of the things that's kind of come to the forefront as far as, okay, what's going on with it? How can we control it? what impact is it actually going to have on people kind of going forward? And and it was getting to the point where, in some cases, it was becoming a significant sort of cost that people were going to have to manage, and I think if you're in a with most residential property, we're fairly protected, or we have been fairly protected by the price cap, and obviously with that price cap kind of now moving northwards, it seems that we're no longer protected, and it kind of in my eyes kind of made a bit of a mockery of what that price cap was supposed to be, because the idea was to kind of protect consumers, and it almost seems that it doesn't it doesn't protect consumers at all, really. So yeah. So we're seeing it, it increased in April, it increased again in October, and it's just obviously at the moment looking to kind of go up and up, and obviously the government has now stepped in to to help to shield people from that. But I think what we've also got to remember is that the government hasn't gone to the energy companies and say, no, you can't charge this. What they've actually said is, effectively, charge what you want, but we'll make up the difference. Which is strange, because it means that ultimately it is the taxpayer that's going to pay the difference in the long run. So I think some people have kind of sighed this big sigh of relief to sort of say, oh great, we're protected, the government's stepping in, but actually they're going to be still making these payments, and the obviously the energy companies are still going to get paid for it. It's the government and obviously then the taxpayer. So it ends up being us that are actually paying for it.
Well,
anyway,
exactly that. We haven't got anywhere near to paying off just a fraction of the COVID bill yet, have we? For
exactly.
and everything else, plus the energy cap. So it's absolutely right. So what are the things you're seeing that landlords are investigating at the moment? I guess what it's made them do is, first of all, measure. To understand exactly what the impact. I mean, that's in raw technicolor, isn't it? Cash out your bank account. Seeing any trends and observations there? Yeah.
So definitely the first thing I would ask people to look at, or definitely look at, is to look at what their bills have been for the sort of last 12 months. And it's really kind of about landlords taking a closer eye on what their expenditure and costs are going to be. So I've seen a lot of people become more conscious of it, certainly. And the first thing to do is figure out actually what you've been charged over the last sort of 12 months, or what your usage has been over the last 12 months. And I have actually put a little YouTube video together on that. So maybe that's something you could drop a link to maybe in the show notes, Mark, and and people can go and take a look at that. And it basically just kind of looking at how do you actually measure what you've used over the last 12 months, because your usage over the last 12 months is going to be very similar over the next 12 months, but what's changed is the amount that you're actually going to pay per unit of energy. So you can then obviously then forecast that kind of going forwards. So once you realize kind of what your costs are going to be, what you then start to think about, okay, how do I mitigate these costs? So there's certain things that landlords can look at, and these are certainly the things that I think you should be sort of concentrating on. So the first things are things like putting some smart controls in place on heating if you haven't already got them. So these are things like the smart thermostats, so things like Hive or Nest. We use one called Netatmo in our business, which effectively limits the amount of time that you can boost the heating controls for. So especially in sort of HMOs and service accommodation, it seems to be the tenants or the guests' way of controlling the heating is to whack the heating on when they get cold, and then open the windows when they get warm, or walk out and leave the heating on all day. So it's being able to provide better controls, really. You can look at zoning heating systems. So you're only actually heating particular rooms in a property, so using things like thermostatic radiator valves and zoning controls. And then from a lighting point of view, obviously making sure you're using things like LED lights and things like smart bulbs and motion sensors in communal areas to try and keep the costs down. And then you can really then start to sort of step up into kind of more expensive installations, where previously it probably wouldn't have really made any sense, but certainly now if you try and get a solar installation company to try and give you a quote on something, they're so busy at the moment, because I think everyone's suddenly gone, right, what can I do to mitigate this? Can I get solar panels put in with batteries and this sort of thing? And whereas before the payback period was probably 10 years plus, with the way obviously the inflation's going on the cost of the energy prices, it's probably now more down to sort of like 5 years. So if you're a long-term landlord and you're planning to hold your properties for a long time, then looking at things like solar installation, or maybe some these air source heat pumps, these sort of things may actually start to pay back in a much shorter period of time. So
yeah, interesting. I've got a few friends who have just put I'm waiting for the stats actually, just put battery systems in without the solar. So they're just taking the arbitrage. They're charging the batteries at 2 in the morning and discharging them during the day.
Yeah.
It's not a renewable strategy, but it's certainly taking the old economy 7, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
But that's I think there are 2 different types of mindset here, aren't there? There's the victim mindset of woe is me and this is what's happening, but actually there's quite a lot we can do as homeowners, as landlords, in terms of managing our cost expenditure, but also looking at the efficiency. Some of those methods, as you and I both know, can be quite painful in terms of it needs a capital expenditure. So looking at the return on investment there, and the ROIs have improved significantly, sadly, because of the increase in cost base. Haven't seen a corresponding increase in the capital prices of renewable energy solutions. But it's that sort of, I find it's always that tipping edge. We found with solar, didn't we? The feed-in tariffs were very lucrative earlier, but that's because the technology was nascent. As the technology increases, the feed-in tariffs reduce. And I guess we've seen that with some of the air source heat pump grants and things.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that a few years ago there was obviously a lot of government grants that were introduced to government incentives to kind of get this technology moving, and then I can't remember exactly when it was, but it's probably 5 years or so ago that the government pulled all those grants out, and a lot of the solar companies, or a lot of the companies that had built had been built on the back of these grants and incentives, ended up going bust because their business model kind of no longer worked. And it's almost kind of gone full cycle now, because we're now to the point actually those models would probably work again now, but those businesses are no longer around. So I think it would be a great time to sort of get into that. If anyone's looking to invest in businesses or start a new venture, then certainly renewables, solar, that sort of thing would be a good place to get into right now, I think. So
yeah, wherever there is challenge in the world, there will always be opportunity if we open up the peripheral vision and look for those opportunities. And I really enjoy that actually, when we do those workshop sessions of just brainstorming what those opportunities are.
Yeah.
So what action do you see people exiting some of those fixed income variable cost-based markets, maybe like HMOs, serviced accommodation, or are you seeing the opposite?
There's definitely a more pressure, because I think obviously landlords have had a bit of a beating over the last sort of few years anyway. So I think it could very well tip a few of the kind of traditional sort of HMO landlords potentially over the edge. They might get to a point with all the tax changes and increase in legislation and all this sort of thing. It does seem like another thing that's kind of being piled on top. So I think there will be potentially, as I say, sort of traditional kind of HMO landlords, that have been in the game for a long time, that just kind of go, what, I'm just going to sell up, take the money out, go and put it somewhere else, which obviously then creates opportunity for people that kind of coming into the market who are kind of looking at it going, okay, what can we do? Can we repurpose these HMOs? Maybe look at a slightly different model with them. Is there opportunities to pass those costs potentially onto tenants? Because and this is I suppose this is the with all these changes and stuff that have gone on. I know the government probably don't think this is happening, but actually all that ends up happening is that it's the tenants that end up kind of footing the bill really for everything, because all landlords can do is they can't keep absorbing all these costs. So eventually the costs can only be passed kind of one way, which is kind of downwards onto the tenants. So but definitely see opportunity coming up as traditional landlords kind of exit. They're probably the ones that have got plenty of equity in the properties. So they just look at it and go, well, I might as well just cash out and go and do something different, essentially.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think one of the reasons we've probably not mentioned buy-to-let landlords is because that exposure is firmly in the tenants camp, responsible for all bills.
Yes.
But of course, we've also got the changing scene on EPC ratings, haven't we? With all the buy-to-let landlords have to comply with an EPC rating C in 2023.
Yeah.
So that's coming pretty quick now.
Yeah, and I think that's going to bite. That is going to bite a lot of landlords. I mean, there'll be a vast amount of landlords that have no idea that this is coming in, similar to the section 24 tax changes, where the first thing they knew about it was that when they filed their tax return, if they bothered to file their tax return, is that the accountant came along and told them, oh, do you realize you owe the government X amount of money for the HMRC X amount of money? And I think this is going to happen with the EPCs as well. There's going to be a lot of landlords that are just completely oblivious to what's going on, and they're going to get a bit of a rude awakening, I think, in 2023. Which, again, looking on the bright side of it, creates opportunity for people, because again, it will be another thing that traditional landlords go, oh, had enough of this. How can I get out and do something different? So,
well, definitely, we had a portfolio landlord approach us recently, stuck in a real cleft stick, really. They've got the problem where they've got the EPC rating coming towards them, significant investment required in their property. I think they're at E at the moment, D/E. Significant investment required, haven't got the capital, but that was further compounded by them also coming up for refinance.
Right.
And of course, the government are using the banks here to force a change in behaviour, try and get on a 2 to 3 year refinance product in the buy-to-let market when you're not on an EPC rating C. Well, it's hard now, but it's going to become incredibly difficult over the next 12 months, which is going to force capital to be injected, or alternative of maybe an exit strategy. So if you've got the challenge of having to come up with, I don't know, say £50,000 into a property or properties, you might choose to just sell at a discount.
Absolutely,
which again is another example of opportunity that awaits those that are mindful to put capital in.
Absolutely, yeah. No, definitely. I can you can almost see it unfolding in front of you, can't you? And it's about being in that, being in the position so you can go and help those landlords to, if they decide they want to get out, being in the position and probably starting those conversations sort of now. Maybe talking to some of these traditional landlords, saying, do you realize this is kind of what's going on, this is going to happen, and are you ready for it? What your plans are? If you can start having those conversations now, a few months down the line, they may actually go, you know what, let's see if we can move this property on instead of spending, as you say, 50 grand trying to get it up to an EPCC. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of merit in that, and as you say, it's pipelining as well. It's those conversations. The first few seeds sown might fall on stony ground, but in 3, 6, 9, 12 months' time, that phone might start ringing and say, oh, okay, I remember that conversation we had. Now's the time for us to have a serious chat. So I want to take you back to the early part of the podcast. You mentioned family. I know our friendships lasted for many years, and I know family is right at the heart of what you do, and some of your emerging strategy as well. Would you share with our listeners maybe a bit of your personal story and how that's translating into your property strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. So I mentioned earlier we've got a son, Jacob, that's 10. So Jacob was born with special needs. So he was born 8 weeks early with cerebral palsy, and it took us probably a year to actually kind of realise that something wasn't quite right. I mean, basically you're kind of not told straight away. It doesn't kind of happen like that. It basically you kind of notice that they start to just miss development markers. So where normal kids would kind of start to sit up, or they'd start to crawl, or you kind of go, well, he's not really doing that, and so So it took us probably the first sort of year of him being around to us to realize something wasn't quite right. And it actually took 2 years before we got a proper sort of diagnosis. And again, because they don't like to sort of, label, if you like, too early on, So eventually, yes, we got a diagnosis that he'd got cerebral palsy, which effectively is a brain injury. It means that he was starved of oxygen some point during either before birth or just after birth. So what it kind of changes your focus a little bit, if you like. I think that I think as parents, I know obviously, Mark, you're a parent to 4 kids, and and as parents, I think we always worry, obviously, about kind of what our kids are going to do, when they're older. We always have that kind of thing in the back of our head. It's like, okay, we've got to keep them alive and keep them sort of going and keep them kind of show them the best way in life and try and be a good leader for them, if you like. And then you sort of kind of think, by the time they're sort of 18, 21, or in my case, let's be honest, sort of late 20s, they probably go off on their own sort of path and do their own thing. But when you have a child with special needs, that child could be dependent on you for the rest of your life, and potentially for the rest of their life as well. So you kind of don't get that feeling of, by the time they hit the age of 21, they're going to be kind of off on their own path. You've got to plan a little bit further than that. So yeah, so for us, it was, we've obviously got an insight into the world of special needs, and we're really fortunate as a family in that Jacob's condition, it affects his lower half, but cerebral palsy is the same as a lot of conditions, is on a scale. It could be on a scale where you wouldn't really know that somebody had kind of got it, all the way up to people that can do very little for themselves and need a full kind of support package, sort of 24/7. So we count ourselves as quite fortunate. Actually, Jacob's condition, it kind of sits kind of towards the bottom end of that sort of scale. But what it gives us an insight into that world, and we're fortunate also from what we've done through business and through property. We've built kind of recurring income streams through property, which afford us an amount of financial security and time. Being able to provide sort of time, for Jo not to have to have gone back to work after the kids were born. So she has essentially become she looks after Jacob and Isla sort of full time, and is able to take the time to be able to take Jacob to lots of appointments and things like that. But we know that not everybody's in that sort of position. So something that's really close to our heart is how can we help other families with kids with special needs to live better lives, essentially, and how can we tie what we know about property and business in with that as well. So we want to use property and business as a vehicle to be able to support those other families in the same way that we've done it for ourselves, really.
That's just amazing. Just amazing to bring your why and your passion and your business acumen all to bear there. So the type of opportunity to do that, are you finding that difficult, or where's the progress coming?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2 areas really we're focusing. So one is we already work with a local supported living company in Coventry. So we rent 2 of our properties to a supported living company. So they house kind of vulnerable adults. This is part of the when Jacob or when somebody gets to the age of 18, 21, they may not want to live at home with their parents anymore, and so they might decide they actually want to live independently. So there's companies out there, supported living companies, that provide this sort of accommodation. So they provide homes with them, and they'll provide a full-time carer that kind of goes and lives with them. So we're actively looking to work with more supported living companies so we can source property. We've got the management company in place already, and then we've got the supported living companies that we can provide the properties for. So we want to kind of work with these organisations, and obviously then work with private investors to bring the capital in to then be able to source the property, and then then put it with the providers. And it's it just ticks a lot of boxes. For us as investors, for us as special needs parents, and obviously for the people that we're providing the accommodation for as well. So there's that side of it, and then the other side of it is one of the things we've experienced going on holiday with Jacob is trying to find suitable, accessible accommodation, and it's very difficult to find it. There just isn't enough accessible high-end accommodation. Unfortunately, when people try and make properties accessible, they can sometimes, they can feel a little bit too kind of clinical and a bit kind of hospital-like. But with the things that have changed in kind of materials and products and stuff out there, there's just no need for that really. You can create really high-end boutique style holiday accommodation that is also functional and accessible. So we're also working on that side of it at the moment, and we've got a project on the go at the moment that we've just secured, or we're in the process of purchasing. So which is part of that will be turned into a accessible holiday accommodation, which is again, it's been a lifelong dream of us, if you like, to have a holiday home. I think a lot of people kind of aspire to have a holiday home, and we've kind of looked at it and gone, actually, why don't we again combine what we know about the special needs world and make it an accessible and open it up for other people to use as well. So so there's a couple of things that we're working away on there. So
I think that's absolutely marvelous, and all the best with that. And maybe we can do a follow-up podcast when that comes online as well. So
absolutely, that'd be great. Yeah.
Brilliant. So the plans for the future, I mean, you've touched on quite a lot of the emerging plans. Do you see just doing one and then potentially roll that out as a product, if you like, elsewhere in the country? Or
I think the so we are, as you say, kind of testing the model a little bit at the moment. So we've got a site that we're working on, and we're 99% sure that the demand is there and that it works. But what we'd like to do long term is to actually set up more of a complex. So a complex that is centered around a health and well-being sort of center. So if you think kind of mini center parks, but completely accessible and open to anybody that would kind of want to come along to it, but especially people that have got members of the family with special needs. Going on holiday with kids is and let's be honest, going on holiday with members of the family can be stressful at times. But if you throw somebody into the mix that's got kind of extra needs, it kind of it really extenuates the stress sometimes. So if we can provide an environment where people can go away, the whole family can go away and relax and enjoy themselves, and the equipment and everything that is there is provided for them, and then with staff on site that can provide help and support and services, so the whole family can get a break. Then that's kind of what we're working towards, and we can see these complexes kind of being dotted kind of all over the country really. We're focusing at the moment in kind of North Devon. That's purely selfish, if you like, because that's where me and Joe have always holidayed. In fact, we've just come back there from down there this weekend, so looking at places. So but if that model works, there's no reason why we couldn't then pick that model up and go, right, well, let's drop one in Wales, let's drop one in Scotland, let's drop one in Portugal or Spain or wherever, and really kind of open things up really, and kind of try and make the world more accessible for people that want to go on holiday really.
Yeah. So what could you share some of the lessons you've learnt in developing either that strategy or some of the other diverse array of interests that you've explained to us earlier on? What are those challenges and some of the lessons you've learnt?
Well, I think something I've learned from kind of running businesses, as you say, from sort of 2005 and kind of through the 7-8 recession and that sort of thing is I think for me it's just constant change. I think we were guilty originally of not not developing things sort of quick enough, and if you're not if you haven't got this kind of this mindset of constant development, constant change, and they say that change is the only constant, isn't it? And you've got to get used to it. And I think you've constantly got to be evolving your products, evolving your services, and developing and changing your people as well. I think that's one of the biggies for me. Yeah, it's constant change. I think you've got to be constantly sort of reinvesting in what it is that you're working on and developing your business.
Brilliant.
Things don't stand still, do they? So.
Well, they certainly don't. It's kind of evolution, really, and I think we've put the mindset of sometimes we put ourselves under an inordinate amount of pressure to make those seismic shifts in one step, one foul swoop. But actually, the reality is things evolve, don't they? They graduate over time. And it's the constant little chipping away at the goal or little chipping away at a certain problem, a few minutes each day just compounds over time. And I think we'd both agree. I'm sure that some of the greatest opportunities as well come from adversity or challenge or just emerge from that peripheral vision out of nowhere. Never even thought of some of the business plans that we're now working on 3 years ago. They just happen by putting yourself out there, being engaged, taking action and being involved.
Yeah, and also surrounding yourself with the right people as well. And I think that's something that I've kind of learned, going from going into sort of managing the family business. Being a business owner can be a really lonely place. It can be because it's one of the things you can't if you get stuck with a problem as a business owner, you can't phone one of your competitors and go, well, how do you do this? How do you guys sell this to those people, or how do you guys develop this? So by putting yourself in an environment and surrounding yourself with the right people, there's an old Jim Rohn saying that you become the 5 people that you surround yourself with, and by doing that you give yourself the opportunity to have obviously support and and see different things that are kind of going on, and like you say, you kind of open your horizons to things. You kind of take the blinkers off for a little bit and see what everyone else is up to and go, oh, that's good, I could do a bit of this, and it's part of the reason why obviously I'm part of the Equa Academy, and it's such a huge kind of resource of people that provide such an amazing support network. So yeah.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for your contribution back into that community. That's hugely appreciated by so many. So one question I always like to finish each podcast on is, if given what you know now, if you were to take yourself back to your teenage years, give us one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? It's because there's so many, isn't there? There's so many sort of things where you think back and not that I have any regrets in particular, but you do think, oh, if only I knew that back then, and I think things would be different, or but I think for me it was I think just be cautious or be conscious of who you're spending time with. I think that I spent a lot of time kind of bouncing around in different sort of jobs and sort of surrounding myself with friends and stuff at the time. And I wouldn't necessarily change that, but I'll just be conscious from a business and a development point of view is who am I spending time with? Who is it that I'm who's my mentor, and who am I looking up to? Because I think at the time there's quite a few years I didn't really have what I would say is like an official mentor. I mean, I had people around me that were kind of working, but I think that I think figuring out from an early age what it is that you want to do, and then finding somebody that is already doing it a few steps down the road from you would be an amazing sort of step up, I think. And I think, to be perfectly honest, I think I went around in circles quite a lot before I kind of found the right sort of people that surrounding myself with the right sort of people. So I think definitely be conscious who you're spending your time with, and look for mentors, I think, at an earlier age that can help push you forward with whatever it is that you want to do.
Brilliant. Great advice. I think many listening to this podcast will be incredibly inspired by your humility and knowledge and experience and forward vision as well. Truly inspiring, Sam. If people do want to get in contact with you and understand more, or just to have a coffee and have a chat and get to know you, sure. How's the best place? Where's the best place to get in contact with you?
I'm pretty active on Facebook and LinkedIn, so you can find me, Sam Cooper, I'm sure we can put a couple of links on the notes on the podcast. So LinkedIn and Facebook is probably the best bet to get hold of me.
Brilliant. Sam Cooper, thank you very much indeed.
No problem at all. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers.